first came up with this idea of doing a talk about claims to fame for Queen's Park, the main reaction was, oh, that's going to take about 10 minutes then, is it? So I'm hoping that nobody's come along tonight thinking they're going to be out of here in time for EastEnders, because it's not going to happen. Because I had quite a lot of ideas of historic events and famous people that I knew had visited Queen's Park at some point. But by doing research, I've actually found out lots of things that I didn't even know about when I started researching the talks. That's always a good thing, that I'm adding to my stock of information about the area just by researching the talk. What I am hoping is that every one of you is going to go away tonight with a few little gems, sort of things about Queen's Park that you didn't know, even those that have lived in the area possibly even longer than I have, that you'll find out some stuff that you just never knew had happened, people that had visited and you sort of never heard of or whatever. The other thing that I'd like, if anybody has got any sort of memories, you know, if they were there and they met one of these famous people or one of the famous events you were present at, please put your hand up and sort of join in, because it'd be really nice at the end if I go away from here with a few extra bits that I didn't know about when I came in tonight. Yeah, so please feel free to sort of add your own memories, because that's the way this sort of history works, is by people just passing their stories on. Most of the stories I've got are actually sort of based in fact, but there are one or two where some bloke told me at the football that this happened. So again, sort of history is a little bit dubious at times, but I've managed to prove just about all of it. So what I'd like to start with is royalty. We'll sort of start at the top with sort of various royal visitors to Queen's Park, or people with a royal connection. Obviously Queen's Park is named after Queen Victoria, and the very first ever reference to Queen's Park was in about 1890s, when there were some plans drawn up for what was called the new Queen's Park estate. And anyone that comes to next month's talk by my brother over there, that's all based on how the area developed through looking at the various old maps. Before then it was called Ford End, any reference to this little area of Queen's Park. I mean, basically it was just an empty plot of land with just a few cottages, a few farmhouses, and not much else. But certainly 1890s, it's referred to as Queen's Park for the first time. I was really hoping that I could actually prove that Queen Victoria at some point had actually visited Queen's Park. I got really excited at one point because I read about her first ever rail journey, and basically she went from London up to the Midlands and visited places like Leicester and Loughborough, Nottingham, Birmingham. I thought, oh brilliant, because that means she's gone through Bedford station, so she must have gone as near as possible to Queen's Park without getting off. But then I sort of realised that actually that was about 20 or 30 years before the Northern Line out of Bedford was actually built. So my little theory was blown out of the water before it even started. So in fact she actually went on the line from Euston up to Birmingham. So she went quite near Milton Keynes, as it is now, but not really near Bedford. The thing about Queen Victoria, obviously, is that she sort of reigned for the longest sort of time of any sort of monarch. I know the present Queen's sort of catching up a bit. But like I say, as far as I can tell, she never actually visited the park that was named after her, if you like. So that's a bit of a letdown, actually, sort of finding that one out, that she didn't even get within spitting distance of the place. So then I started looking at other kings who maybe got a little bit closer. It's not a very good slide, but that's actually Edward VII. Right, he actually holds the record for the longest stretch as the heir apparent. And like I say, obviously Victoria stayed on the throne for so long that he was actually just over 59 years old by the time he got to the throne. His reign was quite short-lived, only sort of 9 years, and though he did a lot of travelling, he never actually came to Bedford in that time. So again, I thought, oh, I'm on the loser here, because I've sort of come up with two monarchs that haven't been to Queen's Park. But then I started looking back, and actually, when he was known as Prince Albert, the Prince of Wales, right back in 1867, he did actually turn up at Bedford Station and sort of read a few little sort of newspaper articles about it. And he actually arrived at Bedford Rail Station with the King of Denmark, which I thought, that's really weird. Why has he come to the King of Denmark? It seemed a bit obscure. They're on their way to the racing at Oakley. Then I realised that he'd actually married Princess Alexandra of Denmark a couple of years before. So basically he's having a sort of day out with his father-in-law, off to see the races at Oakley. It's actually called the Grand National Hunt Steeplechases. So it's not actually the Grand National, but apparently it's a really sort of high-class steeplechase horse race that they went to. And there's a little quote from the paper. It said, "Crowds of people filled the approaches to Midland Station, and a hearty reception was given to His Royal Highness." So that, you know, if you sort of count Bedford Station as just about in Queen's Park, that is the first monarch that's come near to Queen's Park. I then started reading this other book. It's quite a quirky book. It's all about characters that sort of make up the history of Bedford. It's called Bedford Town and Townsmen, and it takes a little bit of a sarcastic look at you know, the various sort of members of the council, the mayors, and so on. And it says in that book, a year later, the Prince of Wales journeyed from London to Leeds. The train stopped in 4 minutes at Bedford Station. The mayor, Mr. T.T. Bray, and the corporation resolved to profitably utilise this interval by appearing in their robes and presenting an address to the Prince. So presumably they sort of just ran down the window of the carriage and started shouting at him about how great Bedford was. It says, HRH seems to have endured the infliction with composure, but the chronicles of the event did not mention that he had anything to say in reply. So it's no wonder actually that once he became king, that he didn't actually bother coming back to Bedford again. He's going to get hassled by the mayor every time he turns up. Right, so we need to move on now to the first official royal visit. Right, you get 2 stamps for the price of 1 here, because George V actually turned up on official visits to Queen's Park on 2 occasions at either end of the First World War. Right, the very first visit was in October 1914, soon after the outbreak of the war, and His Majesty George V came to Bedford and inspected the Scottish troops in a large field just off Bromham Road. The field is actually called the King's Field, and it's alongside Bromham Road and opposite Biddenham Turn, so basically the north bit of Bromham Road, between the last houses of Queen's Park and Biddenham Turn. That's actually known as the King's Field. Now, I'm not sure if that's actually named after that king and his visit. But, sorry?
Was there openings, wasn't it?
That's right, it was at one point, yeah. That's right, yeah, I think it's just sort of barren land now, but so in 1914 he visited the Scottish troops. I think it was the Gordon Highlanders that actually stationed in this sort of area. And he came along and inspected the troops. He then went off later the day and inspected troops at Bedford School and various other places. Right, the second visit of George V came towards the end of the First World War, and mainly it's to acknowledge the part that W.H. Allen's played in the First World War, sort of making stuff for the military and whatever. It's quite interesting that his wife, Queen Mary, actually turned up as well. It seems sort of more of a bloke place to visit, and she's not quite dressed for the occasion, going around sort of an oily, greasy old engineering works. But she came along as well. The reason she wanted to actually visit was that she was really interested in the fact that they had a lot of women workers at the time, and that was sort of a big part of the war effort, was to encourage more women to actually work in the factories. So they arrived at Bedford Station in the morning anyway, and they're driven over the bridge to Queen's Engineering Works, which reminds me, obviously, Queen's Engineering Works, that branch of Allen's, was also named after Queen Victoria, so she keeps popping up all over the place. And it was noticed when he turned up how free and chatty the king was. Right, the royal couple spent just over an hour visiting various departments at the works, and there's quite a nice quote talking about the women workers there. I've got this quote from the Bed's Times at the time, and it says, "The girls here, as everywhere, look charmingly spick and span in their spotlessly clean and becoming overalls, and the little blush that came over their faces when their Majesties paused on the walk to note them made them no less attractive." I was going to dig out a photograph of what they looked like, but I thought, no, it's been too much for some of you. It then goes on, "Indeed, it was a great day for the lassies, and their beaming faces told eloquently their own story." Obviously, there's not much of Allen's works left now, but the one remaining part, the what's now called the Allen Club, in those days was called the Institute, and that wasn't originally on the plan for the royal couple to visit, but apparently they'd sort of rushed around some of the bits, so they actually had a few minutes to spare. And what actually happened, when they got to the entrance of the Allen Club, the king started talking to someone that was sort of involved in the Boer War, I think it was, and he sort of spent so long talking to this person that the Queen went off ahead and said, I'll catch you up. And she went in and had a quick look around inside of the Allen Club. When she came out, the King was still standing there talking to the same person outside. And apparently the Queen made a comment that we must wait for the King. So eventually he went in and had a quick sort of whiz around as well. One of the reasons that they had this extra time on the programme, it says at one point 7 minutes were allowed in the programme for the test house, where a large number of engines were running, but nearer 7 seconds sufficed. The vibration and noise being such that one could not hear himself shout. So they've obviously brought the King along and tried sort of having a conversation in the middle of a room that's got loads of engines running, which is not very good planning, I don't think. Right, before leaving to visit Bedford High and Bedford schools, the King decreed that the workforce be given the afternoon off. So they're only there for about an hour, up to about just after 12 o'clock. Now, apparently W.H. Allen himself had already decided that that was going to be the case. But when I started looking at it, it was actually the visit was on a Thursday, which would have been the early closing anyway. So I've heard about sort of W.H. Allen not being that generous with sort of paying overtime and stuff. You know, and it's obviously, you know, but it's us and the King wouldn't have known that it's half day closing in Bedford. Right, there's another quick slide. Obviously that's not there anymore, but when the factory was knocked down, that was put up in recognition of the King's visit. I've also got another slide a little bit later on that shows all the different plaques where various royal visitors actually came and visited the works. Nobody said that they were there so far, so quite good going. Right, so come on to the next king. I thought that's going to be quite a difficult one to track down, and in fact Edward VIII never actually came to Bedford at all, and obviously he abdicated then as well. So we start looking at George VI. At that time, Allen's was renowned for its enlightened attitude to education and training and its good industrial relations. So 2 years after the previous king had been there, George V, W.H. Allen's had another royal visitor, and that's Prince Albert, Prince of Wales, in February 1920, and he was the president of the Industrial Welfare Society. There wasn't very much press coverage of this, because obviously he wasn't sort of directly in line to the throne at the time. But it says Prince Albert visited the Queen's Engineering Works on Thursday and inspected the Boys' Welfare Department. Afterwards, he made a tour of the works. His Royal Highness shook hands with one boy and asked him how old he was. The boy answered, "Quite well, thank you. How are you, sir?" I don't know if it was the noise of the engines, so I actually hear that. So I'm just under that. This should have a slide of George V somewhere. Maybe I haven't got it. Right, so apparently after that, the Prince of Wales actually ran quite a lot of boys' camps, and a lot of workers from Allen's would get sent on those as a way of sort of, I suppose they call it in-service training these days. The next day after the Prince of Wales had visited works, they actually opened a cinema in what was the canteen there. So that's probably part of his visit, was to actually see facilities like that that were sort of quite sort of trendy at the time. Obviously, that visit took on greater significance because a few years later, Edward VIII abdicated, and Prince Albert, that visited the works as the Duke of York, became King George VI, or the Queen's dad, as we call him now. Right, the next royal visit, it's quite a little bit later. Any of you that came over the bridge today and saw the eyesore of an office block on the right-hand side, there it is at the bottom in its heyday. It's actually built in 1958, and the year later, Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, turned up to officially open that block. And I think it's also to commemorate the 80th anniversary of W.H. Allen's existence, not in Bedford, but obviously going back to when they were in London. So he turned up, he actually spent sort of quite a few hours there, and again, lots of women workers sort of greeting the royal person. So he had lunch with the directors. The lunch with the directors, according to the timetable, seemed to have taken about 2.5 to 3 hours. He then had 3 hours looking around the various departments. And I've got a few photographs just to show a few bits of the occasion. And there's a whole brochure that Allen's produced showing basically Prince Philip desperately trying to look interested as someone sort of showed them a not very interested looking machine. And there's sort of endless photographs of him showing really good interest in it. I love the little van at the bottom, it looks a bit like a Pokemobile that was escorting him around parts of the works. Right, and I said about the unveiling the various plaques. The one at the top is the plaque for Prince Philip's visit in 1959. At the bottom, it's not a very clear slide, but the Prince Philip one's on that side, and then it's George VI in the middle and George V on the other side. I'm not quite sure where all those plaques ended up. I know a lot of stuff from Allen's actually went to the Bedford Museum to form an archive there, but it'd be quite interesting to track down where those bronze plaques actually sort of ended up. So they actually produced a brochure commemorating the royal visit. It's, like I say, packed full of interesting photographs. It's probably worth, if any of you new people that worked at Allen's, actually try and see a copy of that and see if there's anybody you recognise in there. And obviously that same view today, the people have all gone, as that's all the glass and the various other bits, and that's how it's ended up. And it's only, what, less than 50 years since it was officially opened. So sometimes it's sort of quite a sad thing that happens to places, and I think fairly soon it is actually going to be knocked down, and I've seen a sign up there for luxury apartments already.
Is that magazine in the county records office? Do you know?
They'd have a copy there, and also at Bedford Library.
Yeah.
That's open on the Tuesday, the
local
history section. Yeah, and a lot of the stuff about George V, there was a brochure especially for that event, and that's a really interesting book to look at. Yeah. Right, apparently sort of Kenneth Allen, who was the chairman at the time of Prince Philip's visit, said it was clear to all those with whom Prince Philip spoke that he is deeply and widely acquainted with industrial matters, and above all he is genuinely concerned about and interested in people. This was a memorable occasion in the history of the company. Right, we're going to sort of fast forward a little bit to sort of fairly recent history. And when we had a meeting last week, we nearly had a little bit of an argument about when it was that the Queen actually visited Queen's Spark, that's sort of the current Queen. Because I was convinced it was more than 10 years ago, and quite a lot of others thought, no, surely it was sort of sooner than that. But obviously it says on there 1996, and luckily I had a photograph on my camera so I could actually sort of solve the argument, and it was 12 years ago nearly now. I've got quite a personal interest in this visit because at the time I was working on a computer course, but I was also working voluntarily at Bedford Community Arts, who actually asked me if they could commission me to actually be the official photographer for the Westbourne Centre, that's now Barnfield College down the road. And it's quite a good excuse to get out of this computer course for a day and say that you've been asked to photograph the Queen. I don't think I could have said no, you're not going. The one thing that worried me a little bit is because they had to do sort of various checks on your character. One of the things they needed was your passport a week before, and I handed my passport in, and a lot of people said, because at the time I had a beard on the photograph, and a lot of people said I really look like Jerry Adams or some Middle East terrorist. And suddenly I was given these security guards this sort of passport that looked a bit incriminating, but they let me do the job anyway, so it's quite good. I mean, it's probably my first experience of being a paparazzi. You do actually learn to sort of sharpen your elbows, and when you get to a good point, you sort of just go like that with your camera so nobody can get in front or to the side of you. But there's a little bit of barging going on. The day before the actual visit, we had a walk through, and this really tough security guard sort of told you where you had to stand and when you had to move, and obviously you're not allowed to say anything. So it's quite a difficult job to do because you can't say, you know, look this way or smile or cheer up or whatever. It's not sort of on the agenda. And you only got sort of like a couple of minutes each time to actually take the photograph and then move on. And you've always got to stay, I think it's about a minute ahead of where the Queen goes. You've got to get in position before she gets there so you don't actually get in the way. Luckily when she went in the nursery, I wasn't actually supposed to go into the nursery bit, I found out afterwards. I was supposed to stay in the other bit, but I actually snuck in the back way because I still had a few photographs to use up. Luckily quickly changed the film before she got in there, and in fact, probably my most pleasing photograph was taken in the nursery. It's that one. Because what it was, when she was going around Barnfield College, they weren't the most sort of thrilling displays that she was having to look at and sort of show interest in. And suddenly in the nursery, this little kid sort of went running up to her, gave her this card and then ran off giggling. And the Queen opened the card and just burst out laughing. And it's one of these sort of really lovely sort of natural moments where that sort of facade of sort of seriousness dropped and she sort of showed, sort of she was human after all. And sort of, I'd love to know what was actually in the card, whether it's a drawing of her or a comment or whatever. I've still got the little tag that you had to wear as well, because if you wear that, then you're safe apparently. It's a souvenir of the royal visit. Did anybody else here see the Queen?
Yes.
Yeah? Oh, right, was that at, just down by the school?
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, the plaque that she unveiled is not the most glamorous building in the world. It's like a big shed in the playground. I'm sure she's... Yeah? All right. I mean, the other thing about that visit, her husband also came, but they actually split up when they got to the railway station. He went off in one car and actually did an opening at the Bedford Hockey Centre, and the Queen concentrated on just the Westbourne Centre and opening the nursery. And then later in the day they sort of met up and had lunch and went off to various other schools in the town. But certainly that was another couple of royal visits that we can note for that. Right, to bring it right up to date, obviously a couple of years ago Prince Charles visited Queen's Park. And again, we've got personal interest in that because the Queen's Park Lives team that produced the second or third magazine were invited along, and it's just next door, that we waited for ages and ages for Prince Charles to turn up. And the reason he was quite late, apparently, he was just going around and just talking to everybody, not just the official visitors, the people he had to shake hands with, but he was just kind of going over and talking to the crowd, and I think it's at least 20-30 minutes before he finally arrived where he was sort of due. Yeah, so he actually basically turned up outside the mosque and met the various faith leaders from the Muslim, Sikh and Christian communities. He then went through the the playground over the road and saw the cricket team in action and All Saints basketball team, and then he listened to Fusion singing in the church next door, and he eventually came into the community centre. What I quite liked in the community centre actually, because we were one of the first sort of groups inside the door, but there were people like the real sort of top dignitaries like the mayor and the local MP were actually sort of standing around looking a bit lost, because Prince Charles really concentrated all the way round on talking to the people rather than actually the big sort of dignitaries with their chains and their flashy suits. He even spent a long time talking to a group of Muslim women, and it's quite nice with that as well, because he actually positioned himself in such a way that it wasn't a set-up photo opportunity. He actually sat in such a position that they couldn't get a good photograph of him, and I think he was just genuinely interested in how the community works and how it's basically such a nice place to live. So that was a really good sort of visit. I do remember when he shook my hand, he said something like, "And what do you do with the magazine?" And I said, "Well, I do some of the photographs, a bit of the layout, and I've also got to the stage where I'm old enough to actually give some memories." I always remember that he said, "Oh, yeah, it comes to all of us." Before I could say, "Are you calling me old?" Right, so it's quite amazing actually, because I mean, obviously Queen's Park's only just this little small section just on the sort of the edge of a fairly big town, but to have that many royal visitors in the last 100 or so years is really sort of quite amazing. I think it says quite a lot about the area that we've had so much interest from members of the royal family over the years. So I thought, where do we go from the royal family? So I thought probably the next best bet is to look at prime ministers of the country. Now, quite a lot of prime ministers have visited the town centre, but as far as I can tell, only one has actually turned up in Queen's Park, and there's a little advert for it on the Times. It's Howard Macmillan, and this is in 1957. Right, so we've had Winston Churchill, Maggie Thatcher, John Major, people like that have been in the town centre, but as far as I can tell, Howard Macmillan's the only serving Prime Minister that's been to Queen's Park. Basically, he held a rally at the Erie, the Bedford Town football ground, and as you can see, it was free to stand, but it's 10 shillings or 2 shillings to sit in the main stand under cover. This is just a log, 'cause it poured with rain apparently that day. It's quite interesting because the week before, the local papers were full of it, and they were expecting 10,000 people. Apparently they'd hired a train to come up from Luton, and loads of people were due to come from the various villages to support the rally. One thing they were a bit worried about was that there was an imminent bus strike going to take place. I had to laugh actually because the week before they said the first stage of the strike is that there will be no buses running after midnight. You know, if you try and get a bus these days after 6 o'clock, you know, you're out of luck. But if you think about it, 1957, you know, most people didn't have cars, so the only way to actually get around town would have been sort of to rely on the regular bus service, which I don't know what hour the morning actually finished. But it's quite funny that, you know, after midnight. And apparently by the time of the rally, it was a totally national bus strike on, so it meant that a lot of people just wouldn't be able to get there. And what also stopped a lot of people coming was at about 5 o'clock, about an hour before it's due to start, it poured with rain. So anyone that was planning to come by bike or by walking probably didn't bother coming. So they expected 10,000, only 3,000 actually turned up. I'm still wondering if it's because Bedford's obviously quite a working class town, you know, there's lots of engineering works, and whether they're sort of expecting somehow sort of everyone to turn conservative overnight just to come and see this bloke.
We just lost against the Arsenal, so it's,
that was it, yeah, that sort of played a big part, I'm sure, yeah. Right, it's quite interesting that in those days the stage they set up on the pitch, if it was done these days, they'd get some firm in that comes in and builds the stage in some sort of kit form, and it gets dismantled afterwards and they pay the people for doing it. Not in those days. What it said was that the platform which housed the ministers and other distinguished visitors was a gay construction designed by a firm presided over by Sir John Howard. I don't think it means it was pink. Right, but, you know, it's interesting that Howard, who's sort of got obviously another engineering works the other side of town, sort of built this construction, this stage, especially for this event. And another thing that I found out about it was that obviously Harold Macmillan, he's not like me, he hasn't got a table with loads of notes all over it. He needed a wooden plinth to actually put his notes on. So the local firm, JP White's, the Title Works, actually designed an oak plinth just for the Prime Minister to actually rest his notes on. You know, again, that's something that wouldn't happen these days. You just get a sort of standard, little stand and that's it. And if you're close enough to see, it says that the particular box was actually presented to the Prime Minister at a reception they had later in the evening at the Swan Hotel. So he ended up going away with a nice piece of artwork from a local Queen's Park firm. So those of you that don't know, the Title Works was just at the bottom of the Pond Road Bridge, at the top end of Allen's Works. You know, so again, you know, they make things especially for the occasion. Talk about the occasion, it was quite an important one because a lot of Prime Ministers are famous for having a certain catchphrase that sort of sticks with them. And Macmillan's catchphrase was, "We never had it so good." And so the first time it was ever sort of mentioned in public was actually at this meeting in Queen's Park. A bit like a lot of other catchphrases, you know, things like "come up and see me sometime" or "play it again, Sam." He never actually said that. You know, it was sort of slightly misquoted. And if I just sort of read the actual quote, it's a little bit watered down from "you never had it so good." He actually said, "Indeed, let us be frank about it. Most of our people have never had it so good." And then he went on to say, what was beginning to worry some of them was whether it was too good to last. So it's funny that there's one few little bits of the words that got twisted over time, and even that headline of the week before, the week after, it's already sort of come down to "we never had it so good." Apparently the week after the event, Harold Macmillan wrote to the Bedford Town Football Club chairman to thank them for allowing their ground to be used. And he said, "It's a fine ground, and when you've installed floodlighting, we'll be among the best in the country." Right, we're going to come on to floodlighting a little bit later on actually, we'll sort of have an event surrounding that. And I'll say it was a major national event. It was covered by BBC TV, by BBC Radio, the national press, and apparently they were boasting in the paper that it even had 5 telephone lines installed in the changing rooms just for the use of the press. So again, sort of shows what a big occasion it was in those days. Right, so I couldn't find any other Prime Ministers, so maybe that's sort of just as well actually. So I'm just going to come on to another connection, and it's switching from the House of Commons to the House of Lords, and this is bringing it right up to date. This has only happened a couple of months ago. And again, this type of history that we do, you know, the history starts, you know, someone visited yesterday, it would probably been in this speech if he was famous enough, he or she. And it's the visit of Lord Coe to Queen's Park in his latest capacity as the chairman of the 2012 London Olympic Organising Committee. No, it's not taking Queen's Park, he's not running away trying to get out of the place, by the way. That's not Jay chasing after him either. Tell him about the basketball club. Yeah, so obviously sort of Sebastian Coe is sort of more renowned for his athletics, and then went on to be private secretary to William Hague, and he got his life peerage in the year 2000. So he visited Westfield Middle School just in January this year, and what he was doing is looking at the community sports initiatives around the country, and decided that Bedford is obviously one of those areas, and it was looking at things like the Queen's Park cricket team and the All Saints basketball team as good examples of involving the community in sports. It's quite interesting that it's only just been announced that Bedford's actually going to host some of the teams when that Olympics comes around. It's only 4 years away now, so obviously that visit, he said all the right things, and decided that Bedford's going to be one of the sort of centres to house some of the Olympic teams from around the world. And it may well be that the hockey centre becomes one of the sort of places where they train and so on. Seb Coe, obviously really famous athlete. In his athletics career, he's one of the few athletes to win 2 gold medals at the Olympics. It's actually his least preferred event. That's the 1500 metres. He wasn't expected to win, and then he got silvers at his best event, which is the 800 metres. But there's not many other athletes that have won 2 golds in consecutive years. He broke 8 outdoor world records at 800, 1000 metres, mile, and also a weird 4x800 metre relay, which I don't think he's hardly ever run anyway. Like I say, he's got famous lately for winning the bid for the next Olympics after the one this year. But his other famous achievement was in 1988, he took on this challenge to race Steve Cram around the courtyard of Cambridge College, and it was something that's made famous in the film Chariots of Fire. And he's one of only 3 athletes, Seb Coe, to actually achieve this thing, but they have to run around the courtyard and get back before the clock strikes 12 at midday. So that's one of his other achievements. Right, I'll sneakily put in Chariots of Fire here, because that leads me on to the next connection, the next sort of Bedford person. Because Chariots of Fire was obviously about 2 athletes. It's Howard Abrahams and Eric Liddell. And Howard Abrahams is the one who was actually born in Bedford. Interestingly enough, that feat that they actually showed in the film, just put this random house up just to keep you interested. Yeah? The feat that was shown in the film, Howard Abrahams never actually achieved it. It wasn't achieved until about 3 years after that Olympics. But obviously Hollywood does sort of these little magical things, and obviously onto the film, he did actually run around that courtyard in record time, but it didn't actually happen in real life. So this is the house in Rutland Road. So I've stretched the boundary of Queen's Park just a tiny little bit, just to include this sort of famous athlete. And it would be this house here, where Howard Abrahams was born, 1899. His family actually lived there for about 14 years. So by the time he came to run in the 1924 Olympics in Paris, he was actually living with his family in London. But interestingly enough, like I say, he won the gold medal at 100 yards against all the odds again, because he wasn't the favoured sort of athlete to win. He also got silver in the 4x100 metres. There's a sort of slight complication with the medals at the Paris Olympics, because apparently they didn't have any medal ceremonies, and what happened is that the athletes got their medals about 2 weeks later in the post. So it's not a very glamorous way, you know, normally you get on the podium and national anthems and flags and all sorts. In those days you just got a little package came in the post. What made it even worse for Howard Abrahams is that they didn't actually put enough stamps on the package. So he ended up having to pay a bit extra just to get his medals. I mean, I assume it's because most athletes only won 1 medal. If you've got 2, that extra bit of silver in the package put it over the weight limit. So there's a little bit of added insult to injury there. One of his teammates on the 1924 Olympics athletics team was another Queen's Park person, and that was Jock Dalrymple, which some of you have probably heard of. Anyone that got that last magazine, there's quite a nice interview there with his son Malcolm, talking about the 2
I
of them.
invited him to come tonight, Malcolm,
You did? Oh, right, yeah.
but he hasn't made it. because
sure.
I see him every Tuesday.
Yeah, no.
And here he's got a silver medal in the 1948, didn't he?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and he's a Queen's Park boy, and I said to her, I'd ask him to come tonight.
Oh, brilliant. Tell you what, I'll send him a DVD.
I tell him.
No, I'll send him one anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, that's good, yeah. So like I say, his father, that's James Dale Wimble, was actually in that 1924 Olympics team as well. He lived at the bottom of Hurst Grove, about number 6 Hurst Grove. He also worked at Allen's, so like a lot of local people, that was his job. I don't think he ever had an excuse for being late for work actually, because number 6 Hurst Grove must be one of the nearest houses to the front entrance. The fact he's an athlete as well, in training, you know, there's no way he can sort of say, oh, sorry, I was late. And apparently, when he went training, as people said that they actually saw him training down by the river alongside the railway bridges. So whether he's actually throwing, he's a javelin thrower, whether he's actually throwing javelins across the river trying to reach the other bank or whatever, I'm not quite sure what happened there. The nice story from the magazine was that obviously he trained his son up, and his son then qualified for the 1948 Olympics in the same event, so they're the first father and son to actually take part in Olympics at the same event. And what they used to do, at one point, Malcolm actually used to train for his event in Ratton Road. And obviously he'd come out, chuck a few javelins down the middle of the road. But again, in those days, obviously very few cars on the street, so probably got away with it. But apparently Mr. Allen, WH, it'd be one of the Allen brothers, found out that he was training in the road, causing a bit of a fuss. So he said, you mustn't do that anymore, you must go and train at Allen Park, and I'll give you a dinner time, a couple of hours at dinner time to do your training. Apparently what he didn't tell him was that he wasn't getting that time off, he was having to make the 2 hours up after work. You know, so he didn't let anything get away with him. And we've got this really nice image that Malcolm was telling me about actually, because they couldn't store their javelins at Allen Park, so they'd have to get on their bikes. And there's 2 of them with about 2 or 3 javelins, like a sort of modern day jousting competition, cycling through Queen's Park from Ratton Road right to Allen Park with these javelins sticking out. And I said, did you not get sort of funny looks or comments? And he said, oh no, everybody knew us. You know, they used to wave and say hello. So that's quite good, yeah. And like I say, obviously, Malcolm ended up sort of competing for Great Britain at the last time the Olympics was held in London. Right, the next is a little bit of a departure, because this is the last person before we had the half-time break. But what I was thinking is that in 1924 you only had one option of getting to Paris for the Olympics, and that would be by boat. There's no other way of getting across. Obviously these days there's planes, there's the Channel Link, the one that goes from St Pancras now, there's boats, and obviously in the 60s, 70s there's another option which was hovercraft. And I'm always really grateful for the hovercraft, because I hate travelling by sea anywhere. I can't even sort of cross the Thames without sort of feeling a bit queasy. So the hovercraft was a real sort of boon for me, because I could actually cope with that. And in fact, the person that invented the hovercraft was another person who worked at Allen's. And before we do that, just a quick view of Harold Abrahams there in his training kit, number 419 at Olympics. So I can put that in earlier. But like I say, the person who invented the hovercraft, there was Christopher Cockerell, who studied engineering at Cambridge University in the early 30s, and then his first ever job was actually, he spent 2 years working at Allen's in Queen's Park, and then moved on to study again at Cambridge, and eventually ended up working for Marconi. So during the war, he helped to develop the radar systems, which Winston Churchill apparently said played a huge part in actually winning the war. He also issued 36 patents for various sort of inventions, so he's actually sort of quite a clever bloke. Not all of them sort of came off, and obviously his most famous one was the hovercraft. But the early version of testing for the hovercraft looked something like this. I think this was the original one. So basically it consisted of an industrial air blower. I'm sure it's a bit of a hairdryer, in fact. And there were 2 cans. There's an empty kitty cat tin inside this coffee tin, and a pair of scales, just to sort of demonstrate the principles that he was trying to get across, that there was enough suction for something to actually move smoothly across the water. I haven't got any photos of his earliest experiment for the hovercraft, and apparently it involved a baked beans can and a firework. So he's obviously sort of one of these really inventive inventors. He would sort of try anything to sort of try and make sure his theory worked. Apparently it took 10 years to develop the hovercraft, and in the end he only made about £150,000. It sounds like quite a lot, but for 10 years of work and research, he never actually sort of made that much money on it. The first ever hovercraft was actually on the 50th anniversary of Connery's first cross-channel flight. That's in 1959. And in fact, Sir Christopher Cockerell actually died on the 40th anniversary of that crossing. You know, and then the service obviously stopped in 2000 because the Channel Tunnel by then was the really popular way of getting across the continent. I've got a little bit of a report from the head of the education department in Allens. It's from 1931, and he said Cockerell was described as a sound, healthy and intelligent fellow, a good type of pupil. He has brought some very good ideas in the test bay. So whether he had his baked bean tin and his fireworks out, messing about with them even in those days, who knows. Right, so that's probably it for the first half. I don't know if anyone's got any questions or comments. Right, anyone that's won chocolates, feel free to pass on this way. I think doing the research like I've done on a lot of things about Queen Spark, you feel a little bit like a secret agent. You're sort of delving into people's lives and sort of trying to follow little leads up and sort of working out exactly what was going on. So I thought what I'd do is start the second half with Queen Spark's connections with James Bond. He's probably one of the most famous secret agents. So the first connection, I've got the pictures actually. I'm going to start with the name itself, where the author Ian Fleming got the name James Bond from. So Ian Fleming was writing his first novel, Casino Royale. And he's actually his place was called Goldeneye, somewhere in Jamaica. And what a lot of people don't know is that Ian Fleming was a really keen bird watcher. And on his kitchen table there was a book by a real sort of authority on birds of the West Indies. And he did this book actually called Birds of the West Indies. And that ornithologist was called James Bond. He was actually an American, really famous bird watcher. And what Ian Fleming said was that it struck me that this brief, unromantic, Anglo-Saxon and yet very masculine name was just what I wanted. So a second James Bond was born. I don't know if the fact that they both had an eye for the birds, the two James Bonds, actually played on the cards. I'm not totally certain of that. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, so what's that got to do with Queen Spark then? He's gone off on one. Had too many samosas. Well, what it was, W.H. Allen's eldest surviving grandson was called Kenneth Allen. And Kenneth Allen, he was head of the diesel engine department. He married Eleanor Mary Eales, and his wife's mother remarried and married someone called Mr. Bond, which made her stepson the famous American ornithologist. So I'm really bad on sort of relations, about what sort of relations people are to each other, but basically one of the Allen family's mother-in-law's stepson was James Bond. I don't know if it makes this, it's something like step-mother-in-law of Kenneth Allen. But obviously Kenneth Allen went on to actually become the boss at Allen's and got knighted as well in 1961. So he became one of the sort of most famous of the Allen brothers, W.H. Allen's works. Right, so having got through that one, a bit of a mystery tour, the second connection with, connection with Queen Spark is that Ian Fleming's preferred choice of the part of James Bond when he started making the films was David Niven. And David Niven is one of the sort of famous film stars or musicians that actually came to Queen Spark during the war and performed at Co-Partners Hall. So they they did radio broadcasts from there when they got moved out of London and Bristol. And they also rehearsed for events that were on at the Corn Exchange. So David Niven was quite a regular visitor apparently to Co-Partners Hall, just at the bottom of Long Street, which is now the part of the Charles Wells Brewery. So there's none of that building left. Apparently he also drank in the Bell, David Niven, along with some of the other famous people that used to perform down there. Right, David Niven eventually played the part of Sir James Bond 007, but it's in a spoof movie, a version of Casino Royale, the one that was redone properly a couple of years ago. And apparently David Niven's the only Bond actor that was actually named in some of Ian Fleming's novels. So Ian Fleming obviously had a really soft spot for David Niven. So I'll say that was his preferred choice. So the third connection with Queen's Park is that in the 1950s and 60s it was really popular for Bedford Town to play what's called a showbiz 11. Now showbiz 11s, they normally ended up about 6-5 to one team or the other, and usually there were a couple of really famous names from TV or music playing. There's about sort of 7 or 8 names that nobody had ever heard of that were something to do with the BBC, but nobody had ever sort of seen them. And then quite often they'd have a couple of famous ex-footballers turning out as well, just to sort of bring football fans in. There's a friend of mine sort of said that he went to see this particular match in 1961, and he remembers saying to his mate next to him, "Oh, that bloke's really good, you know, what's his name?" And they looked it up in the programme, and he said, "Oh, it's just some Scottish actor." This is 1961. About a year later, the first James Bond film came out, and that some Scottish actor turned out to be Sean Connery, who then obviously became famous. Probably had to give up his football career because every year after that, for about 10 years, he was making James Bond movies and making loads more money rather than playing football over the Eagles. And he didn't actually say it. This fine young Scots actor turned down a soccer career with Man United in favour of a show business career, so probably did the right thing, I would have thought, yeah. I'd say Ian Fleming didn't actually think that much of Sean Connery. He sort of called him an overgrown stuntman when he first actually saw him. He really wanted David Niven to play that part, but obviously probably made the right decision in the end because he's still the most famous James Bond actor. There was actually another big name playing in that same Showbiz 11 who apparently played brilliantly and scored a really good goal, and that was someone called Des O'Connor. He never actually played part of James Bond, but apparently he's a good player. That brings me on to football. I know some of you have come just for the football bit of it, so you can wake up now and listen in. Like I say, there's a lot of those Showbiz 11s. They quite often have some famous, really famous ex-footballers. The first one I want to look at is Billy Wright. So I'm not sure everyone's actually heard of him. So what I thought I'd do is just do a quick comparison between Billy Wright and David Beckham, just to prove how important Billy Wright was as a player. Right, so the first comparison, that obviously Billy Wright's blonde, so is David Beckham sometimes, not all the time, but I think Billy Wright's a natural blonde, I don't think Beckham was. They both captained their club and country on a number of occasions. They both only played for one English club, and in their day it's the top team, so obviously Wolverhampton Wanderers in the 50s were probably the top English team. Man United possibly were one of the top English teams when Beckham was there. Billy Wright's one of the first footballers to go into advertising. He advertised things like Brill Cream and Lucozade. I'm pretty certain that Beckham's also advertised the same two products. Billy Wright's the first English player to sort of win 100 caps for his country. Beckham's stuck on 99, so he's not quite there yet, but again, sort of bears comparison. On top of all that, Billy Wright married a singer in an all-girl group. Billy Wright, yeah, that's right, it's Joy Beverly and the Beverly Sisters. Obviously Beckham married Posh Spice, the Spice Sisters, what they're called. Right, the one little bit where they do sort of definitely differ is that Billy Wright was never booked or sent off in his career. I think that's something you probably can't say about Beckham, definitely. Right, so really famous player. He actually played at least twice for the Showbiz 11, once in that 1961 match. And I also saw him play in probably about 1967, and I was really thrilled to bits because I used to collect autographs and actually got his autograph in the car park when he came out of the bar afterwards, and that was like my treasured possession for quite a few years. I've still got it actually somewhere. Right, so talking about blonde centre-back captains of England, brings me on to the person in the middle of that picture, Bobby Moore. For a lot of times, Bedford Reserve actually played the West Ham third team, and there's a couple of occasions where sort of Bobby Moore, before he was actually sort of in the first team, would have actually played at the Eagles. But the most important game was when, in 1961, they had the official switching on of the floodlights over the Eagles, and Bobby Moore was in that team. So it was 5 years before they won the World Cup, and he was only sort of just broken into actually the first team at West Ham. But even in those days, he'd been Player of the Year the season before, in his first season. So he was probably one of the most famous players to actually play football over at the Eagles. If you look at the other players on that thing, all of those England footballers actually played at the Eagles at some point. You all know where the Eagles is, where the gasworks, where the brewery is now, just down the bottom there. So if you start on the left-hand side, there's a person you just about to see his nose and his ear, is Martin Peters. He played in a friendly, it's a testimonial, he played for Norwich City against Bedford in about the late, sort of mid-70s. So that's after he'd sort of left West Ham. Jeff Hurst, obviously the hat-trick hero, he definitely played a couple of times for the West Ham third team at the Eagles. I actually met him in Bedford a few years ago and asked him if he remembered ever playing there. And he said that he definitely played there when he was in the A team at West Ham. And I had to remind him he actually played there also for Telford United. When he dropped out of the league, he was playing for Telford United and he played in that game, so I remember seeing him. Right, Bobby Moore had already done. Ray Wilson, put a little face there, he's obviously sort of Bobby Moore's heavier than people made him out to be. Ray Wilson actually played at Bedford in the same year that we won the World Cup. So he played the Everton team in 1966 in the fourth round. He was sort of full-back in that team. That beat.
Did Jeff Hurst play in that team as well?
Not
66?
Oh, in the
World Cup.
In the World Cup, definitely, yeah, 'cause he got a hat-trick in the final, yeah. But I say, Ray Wilson actually played at Bedford the same year, only about 3 months before, actually went on to play at Wembley, and he won the FA Cup and the World Cup in the same year, so quite an important player. And the person over there with 2 and 6 on his shirt is George Cohen, who never actually played at the Eagles, but he was manager of Tunbridge when we played in the Southern League, so he actually turned up at the ground as a manager. So that's 5 of the World Cup winning team actually played at Bedford Town. I couldn't trace any of the others. A lot of them played up north and never actually sort of played many games, sort of, not against sort of non-league teams in the south. But the one player that missed out on the final, Kenny Greaves, there's another player that actually played at Bedford Town. Again, it was when he dropped into non-league and was playing for Barnet. And there's a friend of mine who remembers sort of him coming out of the bell and staggering, this is before the match, staggering down the road. He's obviously sort of renowned for his drinking ability. And apparently he was staggering down the road and signing any scrap of paper anybody put in his hand, you know, cigarette packets, biscuit packets, the lot. And he'd obviously had quite a few apparently before he'd actually sort of turned up to play the match. Right. I said Bobby Moore's one of the most famous players ever to play the Eagles. There's this other bloke, Stanley Matthews. He played at the Eagles a couple of times. But the time I sort of really remember, because I actually went to the match, was when he retired from football and he was manager of Port Vale and they played Bedford in a friendly. So Stanley Matthews, his career spanned 4 decades. He's probably one of the only players I can tell that's actually got 3 nicknames. It's the Wizard of Dribble, the King of Soccer, and the Ageless Wonder. I think he got called the Ageless Wonder because at the age of 50 he was still playing First Division football. He was the only footballer to be knighted while he was still playing football. He's the first footballer of the year, first European footballer of the year, the oldest man to play in the First Division, the oldest man to score a league goal and a cup goal. He even had a FA Cup final named after him, the 1953 Cup final, still known as the Matthews final. So it's 1967, 2 years after he retired from football, so he'd be 52 at the time. He was manager of Port Vale and they arranged a friendly at Bedford Town. Now I always thought that match was a really good one for Bedford to get because, you know, it's a real sort of prestigious game because he decided he was going to play in the match. But it turns out when I read the reports of it, that he actually Stanley Matthews actually phoned up to arrange the game. So even though he was in his 50s, he was desperate to still carry on playing football. And in fact the match was postponed once because he'd hurt his ankle in another friendly, so they had to put it back a month. And eventually he turned up and played. One of the reporters asked him how the only playing night kept himself so fit, and he replied, "I don't smoke and I don't drink, and I train when I feel like it." So it's just obviously a good recipe for success. He said, as I get older, I find I need less training. It's quite interesting looking at the programme for that match, because everybody had just surnames, and then you got down to number 7 for Port Vale, and it was Sir Stan Matthews. So that's how important he was, and it obviously brought a lot of fans along to the ground. From what I can remember of the game, he didn't actually run about that much. Obviously, you know, he's getting on a bit. Bedford won quite easily, but the only time he did actually move really quickly and showed his legendary turn of speed was at the end of the match, because obviously everybody in the ground wanted to try and get his autograph, and he just sort of whizzing off the pitch and nobody could catch him. So that's quite an interesting one. But apparently he played at Bedford in 1947 in some sort of benefit match just after the war. That's one I've not been able to track down yet. Right, so that's the footballers out of the way. Right, so Stanley Matthews is actually sort of renowned for streaking down the wing, so that brings me on to one of Bedford Town's other real big claims to fame, and that is that the popular activity in the 1970s of streaking, the first ever streak at a football match was at Bedford Town.
No, I know who it was.
Probably recognise the man on the screen here, yeah? Sorry, ladies. Right, sorry, it's not a very good picture. It's the best I could do. If anyone wants a better one, it'd be £5. So it was an FA Trophy game, and it was half-time. It was a really boring match as well. And he was bet that he wouldn't sort of take his clothes off and run across the pitch, so he got changed, or got unchanged in the toilets at one end of the ground. Went racing across the pitch, and there's quite a good quote from the report of the day. There wasn't much of a report actually on the match because Bedford lost 1-0, but one of the directors said there was this huge roar as he started his run. Police came from everywhere trying to intercept him, but he sidestepped them and kept going to the other side of the pitch. But he was brought down by a rugger tackle as he was heading to a waiting car. And then one of the fans said, I was in the gents where I saw this chap stripping off. I thought he must be some type of sort of a nut. Then I heard a roar from the crowd and came out to see him racing across the pitch like a good one, with coppers trying to stop him. It was the most exciting part of the match. So that got us national notoriety. We were on grandstand that night. It was also in all the sort of national papers, News of the World and everything else, but that's probably the only existing picture of the chap Bill Pace who did that amazing feat. Right, one of the things that the phrase that you could apply to Bill Pace is that some mothers do have them, which brings me on to the next thing. I'm just hoping that this DVD thing is going to work. Right, so it's the late 1970s, really famous comedy program, Some Mothers Do Have Them. The third series was actually filmed in Queen's Park. So Frank Spencer's house was on Chestnut Avenue, the second house
It was in
up
Ousland Road, wasn't it?
That's it, yeah, they actually filmed quite a lot just around sort of Honeyhill Road and the little streets off of that.
I've got some photos.
So I've had to sit for the whole of the episodes just to sort of find the bits that got Queen's Spark in. Isn't that funny, to be honest? It's sort of dated quite a lot. One of the interesting bits, that theme tune, it's quite a sort of weird theme tune. It's actually done by Ronnie Hazelhurst, who did quite a lot of famous theme tunes. You know, he did things like the Two Ronnies and Porridge and various other things. And what it was, the theme tune, that whistling sound, it's actually the Morse code for the words "Some mothers do have them," played on a piccolo. So yeah, I say I think some of it has dated a little bit.
What was it, the third series?
It's the third series, yeah. So I won't let you sit through all of it, yeah. Just a quick little clip when you go into the house. At one point you do actually see the floodlights of the Eagles, so that's worth waiting for, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no more rude bits after this, I promise. Yeah, a lot of people recognise that at Chestnut Avenue. There's one little scene in one of the episodes where the sign for that road actually says Sodbury Avenue. So they've obviously changed the name of it just for the series. And the reason he moved to Queen's Park is because he blew his house up in Argyle Street in the very first episode. And he got this sort of strange journey that he took in the removal van. He goes in the removal van from Argyle Street. He goes all through these country lanes and over humpback bridges, getting chucked about, and ends up in Queen's Park. And I always sort of think he should have just come back on the road. That's why he'd be there. And there's some really strange continuity in it, because every so often he starts in Freeman Street and ends up in Cambridge from one scene to another. So, knowing a little bit about the area, then it's quite interesting to watch it.
No, well, I'm not standing for any more of this. It's to the police station. Come along.
Right, so that's probably enough of that for now. Maybe at future talk we'll maybe sit through a bit more some of the other things. But last week I went down to the photograph Frank Spencer's house. So it'll be that one there. Obviously they've changed the door in the last sort of 30 years. Updated it a little bit. But that is actually Frank Spencer's house. The other famous person you might have seen just very briefly when I sort of pressed the wrong button. Someone else very famous comedy actor that turned up was Richard Wilson. I know you're going to say, well, I don't believe it, but it did actually happen. He was an insurance agent in the third episode of the series, and he actually turned up in that house as well. So that's a couple of famous comedy stars from Old Bill Pace the Streaker. Right, now apparently some mothers still have them. The original choice to be in it was this bloke, very famous for sort of tripping over and saying Mr. Grimsdale. His connection with Queen's Park is that he was a director at Brighton and Hove Albion. We played in the FA Cup in 1966 on the way to playing Everton. And apparently he turned up at the replay and took the defeat in very good spirit, apparently, and he walked across the pitch. And as he walked across the pitch, the Bedford crowd started singing his theme tune, which is something to do with being a fool. What kind of fool am I? But he just waved at the crowd and took it in good heart. Right, so I thought I'd start looking at, actually the other person that was up for the part of Frank Spence was Ronnie Barker. Again, that's somebody else who was born in Bedford. Can't quite claim Garfield Street to be Queen's Park, so we'll give him a miss, yeah? Right, then, another famous comedian, probably one of the most famous comedians. This is quite an interesting way that this type of oral history works, because the only story I had about him was that he turned up at the football ground once because he was visiting Bedford and people noticed him and they cheered, and that was the only story I had. And I was actually talking to it's Gary's mum and dad over Christmas, and I was saying I'm doing this talk about claims to fame, and they said, well, yeah, it's going to take 10 minutes, and I said, no, I've got loads, I've got the Queen, the various kings, I've got Glenn Miller, I've got Max Miller. And she goes, oh yeah, of course, Max Miller, he used to sort of lodge up just off Honey Hill Road. I thought, really? Because that's not a little bit of story that I've got. And apparently what it was, he had a very good friend who had sort of met in the music halls called Jim Keep. And he actually lived in number 6 Oldfield Road. And when he was visiting Bedford, he'd sort of meet up with him and actually lodge in Oldfield Road with his mate who then ran concert parties. And it's actually claimed that Jim Keep actually wrote some of his material. And obviously, anyone that knows Max Miller, they're sort of a little bit on the rude side, but he never did actually swear. And apparently he's sort of really well-behaved sort of person off the stage. The one little vice he did have was a few drinks. And apparently what happened, Max Miller and Jim Keep would go out on the town, have a few beers, and when they came back, Mrs. Keep wouldn't let them in until they'd sobered up. So I was going to take a photo of the house that he nearly lodged in, but I didn't get round to that one. But I'm pretty certain, obviously, there's no way of telling which pub he actually drank in, but to get from Oldfield Road into town, you'd have to pass the Bell, the Horse and Groom and the Globe, and pass them all 3 of them on the way back, so I'm pretty certain he must have had a drink in at least one of them, if not a couple of drinks in all of them. So that's another famous comedian that actually sort of turned up in Queen's Park. Well, I'm speeding up, so I realise it's about 9 o'clock. Right, Max Miller, no relation with Glenn Miller, but obviously everyone's expecting me to mention Glenn Miller, so here goes. Obviously, I said before, with David Niven doing the radio broadcast from Co-Partners Hall, it's the summer of 1944. Glenn Miller came with the band of the Supreme Allied Command, and apparently they bumped up the orchestra as well, because they're over here to do broadcasts for the BBC and also for the American Forces Network. And there's quite a nice couple of stories here. Right, the first one is a BBC engineer said that the Co-Partners Hall studio contained 4 microphone mixing units capable of accommodating 2 microphones, given a total studio capacity of 8. It's said that when Miller saw the maximum number of microphones was only 8, he complained to the engineers that back in the USA, when he broadcast, a total of 22 microphones would be used. This gave him a little bit of a dilemma, and the engineers thought over the problem for a while and came up with a very logical solution. They got 22 microphones, but only the original 8 were actually connected. And the cables from all the other microphones went to nowhere in particular. And apparently, this arrangement seemed to please Mr. Miller, as he thought the improvement in sound quality was impressive. So they fooled him into thinking it was a sort of a really good studio, and it was just the 8 microphones that he had originally. There's various other stories about sort of people going over there and watching them sort of playing tennis on the tennis courts next to Co-Partners Hall, and also listen to the rehearsals and the music floating out the windows. So lots of people I know have got good memories of that, and getting autographs, and also following them down the pub. Quite often they'd go to the Horse and Groom, and when the crowd got too big, and then move on to the Bell, which had slightly bigger bars there apparently. Right, talking about the Bell, another famous person that was at the Bell on various occasions was Bing Crosby. And apparently there were times when he'd actually open the top window of the pub and sing out to anybody that was passing by. And he'd actually gather quite a big crowd just to listen to Bing Crosby singing from the top window on the top windows of the Bell. So that's probably most of the famous stars. There's a few others like Bob Hope. Someone told me Becky Grable actually turned up at the pub once as well. Talking about sort of famous actresses as well, but I've not actually been able to sort of track that one down. So I'm just going to finish by sort of looking at someone who's had a big involvement with radio, which is why those people came to Bedford in the first place. This is taking quite a lot of digging out. It's not quite as complicated as the James Bond bit. But the little lad there is Guglielmo Marconi, the inventor of the radio. And that photograph, he's 6 years old, looking like he's just swallowed a golf stopper or something. But in fact, what he was, his mum was called Annie Jameson. She was the daughter of the owner of the Irish whisky firm Jameson's, which meant they were a very wealthy family. Because of that, she did a lot of travelling abroad. This was like in the 1870s, which is sort of unheard of. When she was in Italy studying music, she met someone called Giuseppe Marconi. They eloped and got married, had a couple of kids. And that's the 2 kids there. But Mrs. Marconi, or Annie Jameson, didn't believe in formal education. So what she'd do, she'd take young Guglielmo to various places in England, and they sort of did informal education, whatever that means, in various places. Probably recognise that at the corner of Ashburn Road and Bromham Road. You notice that the colour of the bricks are slightly different, but there was actually another house there, and that was the house where Marconi and his mum actually stayed, a place called Collie Orton Villa, just on that corner. The house itself was knocked down because that road was widened quite a bit in the 1950s, so that building went. But it's quite funny, every time we go down the RAF club now, we all sort of say, "Oh, it's Marconi's house." He only actually stayed there, I think, for a month or 2, because then they'd move on to rugby, and then they'd go to London, and presumably all this time they're actually trying to get him to study, because apparently he didn't like studying that much at all until he was about 14. But what he did have as a 5-year-old was a real interest in any sort of electrical, mechanical things. When you think about it, this is 1874, steam trains had just started hurtling up and down the tracks. My version of it is that obviously if he's living in that house, he'd be able to hear the steam trains going up and down the tracks. And there's no way you can say that he didn't drag his mum up to Bottom Road Bridge, just about in the Queen's Park to watch the choo-choos go past it. So the nice thing about that is that, you know, obviously he's one of the most famous Italians. You know, he got the Nobel Prize for inventing the radio. 1874, he's possibly one of the first Italian people to actually sort of live in Bedford as well. You know, so it's one of these sort of little known facts. I think he was only there for, I'd say, maybe a month or 2 at a time. And I've only tracked it down in 1 or 2 places, but it's definitely, that's Marconi's house where that gap is, just there. So that's quite a nice sort of link. I did notice when I was sort of researching it that there's a US Marconi Museum, and that's actually in Bedford in New Hampshire. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Well, there's another connection to Bedford, and apparently the only reason it's in Bedford, New Hampshire, is because, as it says in the website, Marconi spent most of his childhood in Bedford, which I think is pushing it a bit. Yeah, a couple of months here and there is really pushing it, but that's the only link with Bedford, New Hampshire. So it's Bedford's sister town, which, again, I've never heard of that. They just copied the name, basically. Right, so I think that's me just about finished, unless anyone's got any questions. We've overrun by about 10 minutes, I'm sorry about that. You've missed EastEnders, but I'm sure it'll be on repeated at the weekend. So if anyone's got any questions, any queries, any comments?
Any idea why it was called Co-Partners Hall?
Yeah. Got a bit of paper here. That's Molly's told me. Someone's going to ask. When I was researching about the what's going on at the gasworks, it's a book called The BBC in Bedford in World War II. And again, that's in the library in the reference section. What it said was that Co-Partners Hall was a recreational facility part owned by employees of Bedford Gasworks, which means the employees of the gasworks were co-partners in running the hall. I don't know who the other partners were, the gasworks themselves. So they were co-partners in it. I think that's probably as near as you can get to figuring that one out. Yeah, there's normally a bit of logic there. Eventually,
I mean, right up to the close, the Co-Partners Hall was a very active place for weddings, dances. It was hidden right down the bottom of Lawrence Street, but it was, you know, a smashing place to hold a function.
Glenn Miller supposedly described it as the shack in the field, because it was...
I remember that. Of course, yeah. And it's renowned actually that Glenn Miller actually, the last time he actually played music would have been at Co-Partners Hall before going off to Twinwoods and the ill-fated flight where he's never seen again. So Queen's Park was the last place where we actually played. In
There's a few old 78 records that were actually recorded at Co-Partners Hall, and it says it on the record. And I think they only done about 10 copies. So he actually did record at the Co-Partners Hall, not just the Cornet channel.
Well, I know we've overrun by a little while, but I'm sure you'll agree that you've all had value for money tonight, even though some of the links may be slightly tenuous. But, you know, thank you ever so much, Paul.